Using a 19mm socket, let's go ahead and remove our lug nuts. With the lug nuts removed, go ahead and take the wheel off, set it aside. We're going to use our punch, and we want to open up this little dimple right here on our spindle or axle nut. Using a 36mm socket, go ahead and remove your axle nut. Set that aside. Go ahead and grab your brake rotor assembly. We're just going to crank this off to this side here. We're going to go ahead and remove our cotter pin off the bottom of our tie rod end. Now, for any reason, if you can't get this off here, go ahead and snip off the ends. We'll drive this nut right off, and then we'll punch out the remainder part of that cotter pin. Using a 19mm socket, go ahead and remove that nut. Now that that's cleared, we're going to now use a hammer to strike the knuckle right here and release our tie rod end. Set that aside. Now our upper ball joint here, I'm going to go ahead and remove the cotter pin off of this. Try and work that cotter pin free. And ours is just deteriorating apart. It is pretty rusted. And at this point here, we're just gonna snip off what we have there, and we're just gonna drive that nut off. Using our 17mm socket, I'm gonna go ahead and pull that nut off. Gonna use your punch, clear out your cotter pin hole. Using a 10mm socket, we're gonna go ahead and remove the nut right here. And we're gonna continue down the side of the knuckle here, removing the sensor wire here for the ABS. Just going to work our bracket off the top up here. Rotate the knuckle this way. We're going to remove these two 10mm bolts right here on the side of the knuckle. Using a 17mm socket and our wrench, we're going to go ahead and remove our clevis fork bolt, attaching it to the control arm. Our bolt is stuck in here, so we're just going to use a breaker bar with our 17mm socket. And we're just going to work this bolt back and forth. I'm just going to use our small punch right in the center and just work that bolt through. And the bolt should just pop out on the other side. Using a 14mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and remove our upper clevis fork bolt here. Let's go ahead and remove our lower clevis fork here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the top of the knuckle here and release the upper control arm ball joint. Now you want to be careful because once this releases, the control arm will pop up and the knuckle will fall forward. So I'm going to use a bungee cord. I'm going to go up around the upper control arm. And we're going to secure the floating knuckle here to the control arm. By doing this here, it's going to prevent the knuckle from pulling too far out, causing issues with our CV axle and putting undue stress on our ABS and our brake flex hose here. Now underneath the hood, we're going to go ahead and grab our under engine covers. Gently lift up, please away. Can pop our trim pieces up and off. And we just work this off. On the driver's side, we're going to go ahead and release this cover here. It's going to give us access to the driver's side strut tower brace and our strut bolts here. I'm going to remove our 10mm bolts. Going to remove our strut tower brace bolts. These are 12mm. Repeat for the other side. By lifting the strut tower brace, it's going to give us access to this one hidden nut right here that's supporting and holding our strut in place. So let's go ahead and remove these 3 nuts. Using our 17mm deep socket, let's go ahead and remove these nuts. Be prepared, once you remove this nut here, the strut will drop out. So it's best if you can, one hand, loosen with this and hold the strut with the other. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the 2 bolts right here and here to remove our upper control arm. So that means we're going to have to relocate our support bungee here. Now that our knuckle is supported, we're going to go ahead and use a 14mm socket and ratchet to remove these 2 upper control arm bolts. Gonna remove our ball joint nut, remove our protective cap. Go ahead and position our control arm back up. I'm gonna install the rearward bolt first. Doesn't matter which one you install first, it was just my choice to do that one. Get the thread started on that. Now, normally what we want to do is you want to torque down our suspension bolts once the vehicle has been preloaded and the weight of the vehicle is down on the ground, or you have the suspension compressed using a jack, lifting that up completely. In this instance, you can't do it because the strut itself, once it's installed, will interfere with the bolts. You won't be able to get a torque wrench in there. On the front side of the fender well here, there is a hole. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a dowel, or we're gonna use our tool right here, our torque spit screwdriver unit here, and we're gonna use the shaft of it to do a level, a compressed height. So this is supposed to be done, give you a general preliminary setting. With that held in place there, we can go ahead and snug down these bolts. It'll hold it in place. Let's go ahead and torque these bolts down to 23 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and feed our strut back up into place. While you're holding that, reach over the top of the fender. I'm going to go ahead and just bring our clevis fork over. Work the fork up a little bit. Once that's in, we can go ahead and remove our bungee cord support here. I want to go ahead and work our ball joint into our knuckle. Okay, once that's clamped, go ahead and release that. Let's go ahead and tighten down our nut here. All right, before we torque this here, we're just gonna set our tie rod end into our knuckle. This is gonna help stabilize our front wheel while we torque this to 30 foot-pounds. We'll install our ABS wire bracket right here. There's a little tab right here on the top that goes into the control arm. Get that nut installed. Install an upper bracket right here. We have our lower bracket down below. Once we have those installed, let's go ahead and rotate our wheel. Let's go ahead and get our flex hose bracket installed. And let's snug these down. I'm going to go ahead and install our clevis fork bolt. Now the fork might slide down a little bit. We're going to go ahead and tighten that bolt down. I'm going to torque that clevis bolt to 32 foot-pounds. Then go ahead and install our clevis bolts here. Let's go ahead and get our nut started here. Let's go ahead and tighten that down. Let's go ahead and torque down our lower clevis bolt to 47 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and torque the tie rod nut to 40 foot-pounds. You can install your cotter pin. Snip off the excess. Let's go ahead and tighten down our axle nut. I want to install 2 lug nuts. I'm going to go ahead and torque our axle nut down to 181 foot-pounds. Once that's done, go ahead and remove the lug nuts. Go ahead and get your wheel installed. Get your lug nuts all started by hand. Then we'll go ahead and snug them down. Let's go ahead and torque our strut bolts to 44 foot-pounds. Now you don't want to tighten the strut tower brace until you have the wheels on the vehicle and it's down on the ground, on level ground. We have that, so we're going to go ahead. We went ahead and we put our nuts on here. Let's go ahead and tighten these down. Let's go ahead and install our rear trim panel here. Install our driver's side trim. On your original cover here, you probably had a plastic clip right here. Ours may have had one at one time, but it was missing when we got the car. Line up our plastic pins.